Hello everyone, my name is Manuel and I would like to welcome you all to this lab session on social and political issues in interculturality in the European context. Europe's rich history, cultural diversity, and shared values provide a unique framework for understanding the complex dynamic of interculturality. In this lesson, we will explore how Europe's growing cultural diversity influences society, the challenges that it presents, and the opportunities it creates for building more inclusive and integrated communities. I must say that as a member of the Cultural Association Integra, I am proud to be part of an organization based in A Coruña that helps young people integrate into society through work experience by offering them the first exposure to professional world. We help them to build confidence, develop essential skills, and prepare for their future careers. We collaborate closely with businesses and organizations to create meaningful opportunities that bridge the gap between education and employment. Our mission is to promote inclusion and independence, ensuring that young people become active and engaged members of society. Through mentoring, training programs, and networking opportunities, we guide them towards self-sufficiency and personal growth. Many have already benefited from our support, gaining valuable real-world experience, improving their job prospects, and finding their place in workforce. I hope this session provides valuable insights and meaningful discussions for us all. So let's get started. First of all, we have here this table of content. So we are going to talk about interculturality, intercultural integration, social cohesion, and intercultural policies. So I have a question for you all. What is interculturality? Um, I know it's such a difficult word, interculturality. It interculturality refers to the dynamic interaction and mutual influence between different cultural groups. It is not merely about coexistence, but focuses on fostering meaningful exchange, understanding, and respect between diverse cultures, allowing them to learn from one another and create a shared, inclusive social environment. So, in practical terms, interculturality promotes an open dialogue, collaboration, and appreciation for cultural diversity, emphasize the value of each culture's perspectives, practices, knowledge, encouraging a respectful and equal exchange. In contrast to multiculturalism, which often implies parallel coexistence without significant interaction. Interculturality, on the other hand, is about building relationships and actively engaging across cultural lines to enrich communities and address common challenges. We have here the key components. There are key components. Sorry. It would be first one, dialogue and interaction, encouraging conversations between people of different backgrounds to foster understanding and minimize cultural misunderstandings. The second one, equality and respect, recognizing the inherent value of cultures, moving beyond tolerance to actual respect for appreciation of differences. The third one would be mutual learning, allowing cultures to learn from each other and evolve together, creating new set values and understandings. And the fourth one, it would be integration without assimilation. So it would be supporting individuals in maintaining their cultural identities while also participating fully in their societal and civic life. Um, as you as you can see, interculturality is crucial in areas like education, work, healthcare, and governance, where it can lead to more inclusive policies, greater social cohesion, and stronger communities. Um, I I don't know. I think that you will know that Europe's rich history of cultural diversity, shaped by webs of migration, colonization, and the interaction of different ethnic, linguistic, and religious groups. Um, this diversity is a defining characteristic of the European Union, one that brings both strengths and challenges. As you know, the EU has made concerned efforts to recognize and promote cultural diversity as a core value, as seen in policies and frameworks that celebrate and protect cultural heritage across the states. Um, so, however, cultural diversity in Europe goes beyond heritage and preservation. Munoz argues that it is central to European identity, creating a space where various cultures and languages coexist, contributing to the use motto that you can see here, right over here, United in Diversity. He emphasized that rather than aiming for a single European culture, the EU seeks to cultivate a sense of unity that respects and values cultural differences. Um, I would say that one of the key themes in Munoz's work, in Munoz's work, is the role of intercultural dialogue in promoting social cohesion. In a continent as diverse as Europe, dialogue between different cultural groups is essential for creating mutual understanding and addressing potential conflicts. Munoz argues that intercultural dialogue is a tool for reducing prejudices, fostering tolerance, and building a sense of shared belonging. I must say, we must talk about what is cultural diversity. As you can see right over here, cultural diversity is a variety of cultural, ethnic, linguistic, religious, and social groups within a particular society, community, or even within an organization. It represents the inclusion coexistence of multiple distinct cultures, traditions, and worldviews that reflect the richness of human heritage and diversity. To promote this dialogue, the EU has supported numerous initiatives, such as the European Year of Intercultural Dialogue 2008, and funding programs that encourage cultural exchange and cooperation. According to Munoz, these initiatives play a crucial role in breaking down cultural barriers and facilitating collaboration among diverse communities. Now we are going to see some models, the evolution of the integration models. So we have here three. The first one would be assimilation. Immigrants were expected to fully adopt the host culture, often at the expense of their own heritage. Multiculturalism, different cultures coexist, but with limited interaction between groups. Interculturalism, it promotes an active engagement and exchange between diverse cultural groups, fostering a new shared identity. However, Munoz points out that the things that we have seen, he also highlights that while these programs have had positive impacts, there is still a need of ongoing efforts that address underlying issues such as discrimination and social inequality. So now we are going to talk about main challenges of intercut intercultural integration. So as you can see here, we have three. For example, the first one, social exclusion. Marginalized communities often face barriers to full participation and society. The second one, it would be language barriers. Limited language skills can hinder access to essential services and social integration. And the third one, discrimination. Prejudice and stereotypes continue to impact opportunities for minority groups. So, despite the EU's commitment to promoting cultural diverse, Munoz acknowledges that several challenges persist in integrating diverse communities. Some of these challenges include social exclusion and discrimination, Many immigrant and minority groups in Europe face discrimination and social exclusion, which can limit their opportunities for economic and social participation. Munoz points out that this exclusion not only harms individuals but also weakens the social fabric, making it harder to build cohesive communities. Also, the identity and integration for many European nations, immigration, cultural diversity has raised questions about national identity and integration. Munoz explains that while some member states promote multiculturalism, others emphasize assimilation, leading to differences in how integration policies are implemented across the European Union. And the third one, it would be political tensions and populism, or the rise of nationalism and populist movements in several European countries has challenged the EU's commitment to inclusivity. These movements often frame immigration and cultural diversity as threats to national identity, creating political polarization and hindering efforts toward intercultural integration. So now we are going to talk about some other challenges that I have pointed out. So the first thing that I'm going to tell you is that we have some challenges such as, for example, the social inclusion and integration. That's one of the main social issues in intercultural context is how integrate culturally diverse population into a shared social and civic space. This is often a complex process as it requires balancing the preservation of cultural identities with active participation in the broader society. A lack of true inclusion can lead to marginalized communities, feeling of alienation and social divides. Intercultural approaches can support programs that help immigrants, refugees, and minority groups participate fully in society without losing their cultural identities. Also, another challenge is the discrimination and racism. For example, discrimination and racism, xenophobia are significant barriers to intercultural harmony. Prejudices and stereotypes often lead to unequal treatment and social exclusion of certain cultural groups. Addressing these biases is critical for interculturality to succeed. Policies and programs that promote intercultural understanding, anti-discrimination education, and legal protections can help counteract these issues. For example, educational initiatives can promote empathy, understanding, while strong anti-discrimination laws can offer legal resources. The language barriers and access to services that we have right over here. Um, can be both language can be both uniting and dividing factor in intercultural context. Limited access to language resources such as a language classes or translation services can lead to exclusion from critical social services like healthcare, education, and legal aid. Ensuring that language is not a barrier essential for to intercultural integration. Multilingual public services, educational support, intercultural training for public officials can promote access to resources for culturally diverse communities, fostering greater inclusion. Also, the cultural representation and recognition. Often, minority cultures are underrepresented media, politics and institutions, which can lead to a lack of recognition and respect for the contributions and perspectives. This lack of representation often leads to social and political alienation, especially among youth. A commitment to interculturality calls for equitable representation of diverse cultural groups in public life. Politically, this might mean creating platforms for minority voices and incorporating cultural diversity in media, government positions, and policymaking process. Educational inequality. In many multicultural societies, educational institutions may inadvertently favor the dominant culture's language, history, and perspectives, marginalizing minority students. These can create disadvantages for students from diverse backgrounds, affecting their academic achievement as long-term social integration, I would say. Culturally responsive education, which integrates diverse cultural perspectives and histories, is critical in promoting interculturality. Teaching materials and methods that reflect a variety of cultural perspectives can help all students see their identities represented, fostering mutual respect um, and deeper understanding of diversity. Also, we have another challenge, the religious tolerance and secularism. So, as you will know, religion is often closely linked to culture. In intercultural context, different religious practices can sometimes lead to misunderstanding or even conflicts. Debates around secularism and the role of religion in public spaces often become contentious, especially in diverse societies. Promoting interculturality in religious contexts means respecting freedom of belief while fostering tolerance for different religious practices. Policies that protect religious freedom, along with public education about different religions, can help prevent religious discrimination and promote harmonious coexistence. Another challenge would be the political representation and policy making. Minority groups are often underrepresented in government and political institutions, leading to policies that may not fully address their needs or perspectives. Additionally, some political leaders may exploit cultural divisions for political gain. I must say, like leading to populism and nationalism. Policies promoting interculturality should aim for inclusive representation at all levels of government. Encouraging diverse political voices can help ensure that policies reflect the needs of all cultures groups, creating a more balanced and just society. Immigration citizenship policies. Immigration policies are central to interculturality as they determine how it's allowed to enter, work, and stay in a country. Restrictive or exclusionary immigration policies can create cultural divide, impacting the sense of belonging among immigrants. Interculturality advocates for immigration and citizenship policies too that promote inclusivity, respect, integration. Policies could focus on easing naturalization processes, creating pathways to legal residency, supporting newcomers in adapting to the cultural and legal expectations their new countries. We have here also social cohesion and national identity. Interculturality brings up questions about how diverse cultures can collectively contribute to a shared national identity. Some may feel that interculturality threatens traditional values or the cultural homogeneity. So creating a shared identity that is inclusively of diverse cultural backgrounds is crucial for social cohesion. Rather than erasing differences, intercultural approaches seek to celebrate diversity within a unifying framework. And national identity can evolve to embrace multiple heritage and languages, ultimately strengthening a sense of collective belonging. And the last one would be the conflict resolution and peace building. Cultural differences can lead to misunderstanding and conflicts, particularly in areas where historical tensions exist between groups. This is often a significant issue in post-colonial contexts, regions with ethnic conflicts. So we must take into account that interculturality can support peace building efforts by encouraging dialogue, mutual understanding, and collaborative problem solving. Intercultural training for peacekeepers, mediators, and community leaders can play a key role in fostering peaceful coexistence. So, in addressing these issues, interculturality um, aims not to assimilate or standardize cultural identities, but to create a society where diverse cultural groups coexist, interact, and contribute to a richer, more inclusive social fabric. For example, um, introduction to integrate. I don't know. Maybe we should talk about this later. I'm going to talk about the need of for new approaches. Talking about the integration models. So we are going to first we are going to see this video of Adichie. Before after we are going to talk about this. Okay, so right over here. Okay. So we have here this writer. He is called Adichie. He is going to talk about the danger of a single story.
Poverty was my single story of them. Years later, I thought about this when I left Nigeria to go to university in the United States. I was 19. My American roommate was shocked by me. She asked where I had learned to speak English so well and was confused when I said that Nigeria happened to have English as its official language. She asked if she could listen to what she called my tribal music and was consequently very disappointed when I produced my tape of Mariah Carey. She assumed that I did not know how to use a stove. What struck me was this: she had felt sorry for me even before she saw me. Her default position toward me, as an African, was a kind of patronizing, well-meaning pity. My roommate had a single story of Africa, a single story of catastrophe. In this single story, there was no possibility of Africans being similar to her in any way, no possibility of feelings more complex than pity, no possibility of a connection as human equals. I must say that before I went to the US, I didn't consciously identify as African. But in the US, whenever Africa came up, people turned to me, never mind that I knew nothing about places like Namibia. But I did come to embrace this new identity, and in many ways, I think of myself now as African, although I still get quite irritable when Africa is referred to as a country, the most recent example being my otherwise wonderful flight from Lagos 2 days ago, in which there was an announcement on the Virgin flight about their charity walk in India, Africa, and other countries. So after I had spent some years in the US as an African, I began to understand my roommate's response to me. If I had not grown up in Nigeria, and if all I knew about Africa were from popular images, I too would think that Africa was a place of beautiful landscapes, beautiful animals, and incomprehensible people fighting senseless wars, dying of poverty and AIDS, unable to speak for themselves, and waiting to be saved by a kind white foreigner. I would see Africans in the same way that I, as a child, had seen Fide's family. This single story of Africa ultimately comes, I think, from Western literature. Now, here's a quote from the writing of a London merchant called John Locke, who sailed to West Africa in 1561 and kept a fascinating account of his voyage. After referring to the black Africans as beasts who have no houses, he writes, "They are also people without heads, having their mouths and eyes in their breasts." Now, I've laughed every time I've read this, and one must admire the imagination of John Locke. But what is important about his writing is that it represents the beginning of a tradition of telling African stories in the West, a tradition of sub-Saharan Africa as a place of negatives, of difference, of darkness, of people who, in the words of the wonderful poet Rudyard Kipling, are half devil, half child. And so I began to realize that my American roommate must have, throughout her life, seen and heard different versions of this single story. As had a professor who once told me that my novel was not authentically African. Now, I was quite willing to contend that there were a number of things wrong with the novel, that it had failed in a number of places, but I had not quite imagined that it had failed at achieving something called African authenticity. In fact, I did not know what African authenticity was. The professor told me that my characters were too much like him, an educated and middle-class man. My characters drove cars. They were not starving. Therefore, they were not authentically African. But I must quickly add that I, too, am just as guilty on the question of the single story. A few years ago, I visited Mexico from the US. The political climate in the US at the time was tense, and there were debates going on about immigration. And, as often happens in America, immigration became synonymous with Mexicans. There were endless stories of Mexicans as people who were fleecing the healthcare system, sneaking across the border, being arrested at the border, that sort of thing. I remember walking around on my first day in Guadalajara, watching the people going to work, rolling up tortillas in the marketplace, smoking, laughing. I remember first feeling slight surprise, and then I was overwhelmed with shame. I realized that I had been so immersed in the media coverage of Mexicans that they had become one thing in my mind, the abject immigrant. I had bought into the single story of Mexicans, and I could not have been more ashamed of myself. So that is how to create a single story. Show a people as one thing, as only one thing, over and over again, and that is what they become. It is impossible to talk about the single story without talking about power. There is a word, an Igbo word, that I think about whenever I think about the power structures of the world, and it is nkali. It's a noun that loosely translates to be greater than another. Like our economic and political worlds, stories too are defined by the principle of nkali. How they are told, who tells them, when they are told, how many stories are told, are really dependent on power. Power is the ability not just to tell the story of another person, but to make it the definitive story of that person. The Palestinian poet Mourid Barghouti writes that if you want to dispossess a people, the simplest way to do it is to tell their story and to start with secondly.
Well, as you can hear in this TED talk, Chiamanda Noziadici speaks about the danger of single story. This idea um, about the danger of a single story is okay. So, please, over here. This idea that when we hear only one perspective or narrative, we is missing the fuller, more complex picture of people, cultures, and stories. He explains how oversimplified portrayals of countries, people, and cultures lead to stereotypes which can perpetuate misunderstanding and bias. And each narrative is crucial when discussing interculturalism in Europe. Europe's migrant communities often face single story narratives that depict them through stereotypes, often based on their ethnicity, religion, or migration status, acknowledging the diversity within these groups and their contributions to European society. In this context of migration, the single story of migrants as mere economic migrants or refugees often overlooks their rich personal stories, talents, and potential. By recognizing multiple perspectives and avoiding simplification, we can build a more inclusive, culturally rich society where diverse backgrounds are valued, not just tolerated. Well, now I'm going to talk about the use policies promoting interculturality. So, as you can see here, the EU has implemented several frameworks and policies aimed at promoting cultural diversity and fostering inclusion. Munoz details some of these initiatives, including the European Agenda for Culture that you can see here. This policy framework highlights the importance of culture as a driver of economic growth and social cohesion, emphasizing intercultural dialogue as a key element in building inclusive societies. The Creative Europe, this founding program supports projects that promote cultural cooperation and innovation, helping artists, creators, and cultural institutions work across borders. The Charter of Fundamental Rights, this foundational document of the EU, includes articles that protect cultural diversity, affirming that the EU's commitment to ensuring respect for cultural, religious, and linguistic diversity. I must say that Munoz suggests that the EU's approach to cultural diversity must be adapted, responding to changing social and political dynamics. For example, as Europe faces new challenges related to immigration and globalization, the EU will need to strengthen its policies on integration and social cohesion. Additionally, Munoz advocates for a more proactive approach to combating discrimination, ensuring that all individuals have equal opportunities to participate in society. So now we are going to talk about education. That is one of the cornerstone of the intercultural understanding. So as Europe becomes increasingly diverse, understanding intercultural learning is vital for promoting social cohesion and effective communication across cultural divides. Interculturality touches on several key social and political issues, particularly in societies that are increasingly diverse due to globalization, migration, and international collaboration. Below, we have some major social and political issues that arise in the context of interculturality. As I mentioned, the social inclusion and integration, the discrimination and racism, language barriers and access to services. I we have seen these challenges on the previous slide of challenges. So now I'm going to introduce some key concepts that we have here. The first one would be intercultural competence training, providing teachers and students with training in intercultural communication skills equips them to navigate diverse environments effectively and sensitively. Diverse curricula, integrating diverse cultural perspectives into educational materials and literature exposes students to a wide range of worldwide use, fostering empathy and global awareness. And cultural exchange programs, facilitating student exchanges and international partnerships provides first-hand experiences of different cultures, breaking down stereotypes and building lasting intercultural connections. So, as I have mentioned before, I think that now it's time to talk about this introduction to integration models the need for new approaches. So, in today's globalized world, the question of how to integrate diverse population is increasingly significant. Migration has transformed many societies, especially in Europe and North America, where the influx of immigrants has reshaped cultural landscapes. Um, it, it is important understanding the assimilation multiculturalism. So there are two dominant approaches to integration. Assimilation requires that immigrants adapt fully to the dominant culture, often abandoning their native customs and languages. This approach has been widely used in countries like France, where a single national identity is promoted as the foundation of social cohesion. However, Rodriguez Garcia points out that forcing individuals to give up cultural ties can lead to resentment, alienation, and social exclusion, especially if immigrants feel they must choose between their heritage and their new home. Multiculturalism, on the other hand, advocates for the preservation of cultural diversity within society. This is the model popularized in countries like the UK that recognizes and celebrates differences, often encouraging immigrant communities to maintain their cultural identities. While multiculturalism fosters respect for diversity, Rodriguez Lapa critiques this model for sometimes isolating groups into separate communities rather than encouraging meaningful engagement and interaction between different cultural groups. This can lead to a fragmented society where people coexist without fully integrating, creating a lack of shared identity and common ground. Um, we have another approach to interculturalism. Unlike assimilation, interculturalism respects and maintains cultural identities. Unlike multiculturalism, it emphasizes active engagement and interaction between groups. It is in this model, interculturalism encourages immigrants and native citizens alike to participate in a shared social space. This approach promotes a sense of belonging by building common civic values that bridge cultural differences such as respect, equality, and mutual understanding. Um, I must say that Rodriguez Garcia highlights that interculturalism is not merely about tolerance, but about creating opportunities for meaningful dialogue of exchange between cultures. The author argues that interculturalism can foster social cohesion more effectively because it combines respect for cultural diversity with a focus on shared values and responsibilities within society. Interculturalism aims to foster a cohesive society where different cultural groups are not only acknowledged but are actively engaged with one another in daily social, economic, and political life. Um, Another thing that Rodriguez Lapa highlights is the building of true social cohesion. He concludes that by reiterating that neither assimilation nor multiculturalism alone can provide sustainable answer to the challenges of modern multiculturalism societies. Interculturalism with its focus on active engagement and civic values offers a balanced path that values diversity while fostering social cohesion. Interculturalism recognizes that integration is a two-way process requiring effort from both immigrants and native-born citizens to create an inclusive society. Through this approach, Rodriguez Garcia envisions a future where communities are united not by enforced homogeneity or isolated coexistence, but by mutual respect and collaboration. This model reflects the realities of interconnected world where cultural exchange and integration are essential for social harmony and prosperity. Now I'm going to give you some examples of intercultural policies in the European cities. For example, I don't know, the first city in Spain, Barcelona, known for its commitment to diversity, has embraced interculturalism in its urban policies, creating inclusive public spaces, celebrating multicultural events. Berlin, for example, in Germany, fosters intercultural engagements through educational programs, public forums, and support for local arts that reflects in the city's cultural diversity. Rotterdam, in the Netherlands. Rotterdam integrates intercultural in its city planning, encouraging interaction between different communities and creating a welcoming environment for immigrant expatriates. Um, Now, I would like to give some recommendations for supporting intercultural policies. For example, the first one would be increase local government support. For example, governments should continue to endorse fund intercultural programs, recognizing their long-term benefit for social cohesion and unity. The second one would be build partnerships with community organizations. For example, local organizations can provide valuable support and insights, helping cities reach marginalized groups and create more inclusive policies. The third one would be promote media literacy. Media plays a significant role in shaping public's perceptions of diversity, and cities can include media literacy programs in intercultural education to help individuals critically analyze representation of their cultures. So now I'm going to point out some things in order to sum up. Um, In order to sum up the interculturalism in European cultural policies, I want to highlight that European cities have been at the forefront of implementing intercultural policies designed to foster dialogue, mutual respect, and understanding. The document Interculturalism in the Cultural Policies of European Cities explains how cities such as Barcelona, Berlin, and Amsterdam have adopted intercultural strategies to address the challenges of migration and cultural diversity. These strategies aim to create public spaces where people of different cultural backgrounds can meet, exchange ideas, and collaborate. Cultural policies focus on promoting inclusive urban planning, providing educational opportunities for marginalized groups, ensuring that all communities have a voice in the political and cultural life of the city. By adopting intercultural policies, cities are moving away from the idea of me, from the idea of melting pot, where cultures are expected to blend into singular identity, and instead are encouraging a mosaic of cultures where people can retain their distinctiveness while contributing to a shared community. This approach helps combat segregation and enhance social cohesion, leading to a more harmonious, resilient societies. So, about the role of intercultural learning, I must say that in another vital component of fostering cultural understanding in Europe, according to another document, Intercultural Learning Theories, Contexts and Realities, intercultural learning goes beyond simply knowing about other cultures. It's about actively engaging with people from different backgrounds and learning from their lived life experience. Intercultural learning encourages empathy, active listening, and openness to a new perspectives. It involves recognizing the complexities and nuance of other cultures and how they intersect with a personal identity. Um, I want to highlight that this type of learning can take place in various settings, such as school workplaces and community centers. It can involve directly um, in exchanges of more structured programs like Erasmus Plus program, which supports mobility and educational exchange between European countries through intercultural learning. Individuals not only gain knowledge um, of other cultures, but also develop skills for collaboration, communication, and conflict resolution. Another idea, I'm going to introduce you the main conclusion, the main conclusions this of this lesson. So, the geopolitical context of migration. Migration in Europe is not just a domestic issue, but also a geopolitical challenge. The ongoing conflicts in the Middle East, the economic instability in Africa, and the climate change-induced displacement are contributing to increased migration to Europe. As you could see in the Council of Europe's geopolitical context of migration, this report highlights the complexities of migration in Europe, emphasizing the global nature of migration patterns and their links to other geopolitical dynamics. Migrants are not only fleeing war, poverty, and persecution, but are also responding to economic opportunities in Europe. The geopolitical context requires European nations to adopt policies that are both humanitarian and practical, ensuring that migration is managed in a way that promotes integration while respecting international human rights standards. So, I have some conclusions. For example, the video of Adichie. We could say that Europe is a crossroads where increasing diversity brought about by migration offers both opportunities and challenges. By embracing interculturalism, promoting intercultural learning, and creating inclusive policies, European societies can address the complexities of migration while fostering unity and social cohesion. The challenge lies on moving beyond simplistic narratives, as Adichie said, and understanding that the diversity of experiences that migrants bring only through open-mindedness, dialogue, and willingness to learn from each other can Europe hope to navigate complexities of cultural integration and build a future that celebrates diversity, inclusion, and solidarity. And the first thing, the main conclusion would be that interculturality presents both challenges and opportunities for Europe. Social issues like stereotyping, exclusion, and identity conflicts can create division, while political challenges such as inconsistent policies and rising nationalism pose additional obstacles. However, with effective education, community initiatives, and policy reforms, Europe can continue working toward an inclusive society that respects and celebrates diversity. As we look toward the future, it's clear that interculturality is just about coexistence. It's about actively embracing and learning from one another, building a Europe that is united in its diversity. And that would be it. So thank you all for joining this session, social and political issues and interculturality.